Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets finally lose a game really a little bit early in the 2023 calendar year. But we're going to take a look at Nicholas Claxton, how his game has evolved all the way back to Greenville, South Carolina, what it means for this team over the course of this season, and why he and Ben Simmons are truly going to be the keys to unlocking the Brooklyn Nets playoff potential.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets. Every single day over there, you're going to find Doug Norrie, owner-operator of DFSR, for all your daily fantasy sports rankings from DraftKings to FanDuel. He's got you covered. I'm Adam Arbrecht breaking down the playoff New York Football Giants on the One Giant podcast with my boy Andy Mack. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day, free on all those great platforms. And let you know, today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. And Doug, shame on you, sir. Taking off today from the podcast. You really cost the franchise. Hope you're satisfied with yourself.
Well, once the Nets heard that I wasn't going to be on the podcast after the game, it really feels like it all went to pot because they hear about it.
Energy.
It brings the energy goes way down. They say, what's the point? Right? Like, what's the point? Why even bother? Like, if he's not going to be doing the live after the game, what's the point of even trying? And that's when you get, a loss to the Bulls and a winning streak stopped. And I only blame myself at this point. And so apologies to Nets Nation. Totally put this one on my back. Happy to take the L's when it's my fault. But I do feel like it stems directly from the time that I said, hey, I don't think I can jump on the podcast tonight. Right from there, it's all downhill.
They call it an emotional letdown. That's all that is. But I was there, and that didn't seem to uplift them. It's all about having, again, it's just like Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. If they're both not there for you, you sometimes feel like you're not going to get the best effort. Tongue in cheek as it may be, we did the live last night on YouTube, or I did, I should say. Obviously, Doug wasn't there. And for the most part, it was just, hey, it's a loss. We don't need to look too deep into it because the Nets have built up so much equity in the winning streak and feeling like, hey, a one-off, you can just go ahead and push back it and keep moving down the schedule. But inside of it, not even this game specifically with Chicago, but we've talked a lot this season about Nicholas Claxton, the evolution of his game, and what it can mean going forward. And I came across on, actually found it on LinkedIn, by the way. Speaking of which, sponsor the show. No reason to
shout out LinkedIn. Yeah,
tying it in, baby. They call that synergy, I think, in the business world.
Oh, big time.
They posted up a video that was called From Greenville to Brooklyn. And it was essentially just a little, it was 16 minutes, kind of chronicling Nicholas Claxton coming from a youth player all the way through Georgia and then ultimately to the Brooklyn Nets at the NBA level. And I found it pretty interesting because we go back and think about how just a year ago it was, boy, is Claxton going to be able to put on some muscle and get a little more physical? Well, he went ahead and he did that, right? And we're seeing some of the evolution of his game this season. And when I went and watched it, first of all, it was really cool. Didn't know that both his parents attended Georgia, that his father played at Georgia, also went over and played in Europe, and then his father all the way up until high school coached Nicholas, and the entire focus of it was being also a guy that could handle the ball, playing with your offhand, being someone that could guard every position on the court. And Claxton wasn't a kid. He was in high school at 6'6'1", which is still enormous as a freshman, but by basketball standards, you're not necessarily looking at becoming a center. He had to take off an entire year just to physically get bigger and stronger to help support his back as he was going through the growth spurt. My biggest takeaway from it, among non-basketball stuff, was, as with probably most players in the NBA, as dedicated, as driven, and as passionate about being successful at basketball as anyone, but also like the dude is so quiet. He is like this humble, quiet guy who then also, when he gets to Brooklyn, and you hear in the video from Kyrie and from Kevin Durant about, we need him to be that guy, needs to be the aggressor, needs to be a tone setter. And that was from Kyrie. And then from Kevin, it was, where is he on the court? What is he doing? How is he making the impact? Like, it looks like at the highest level, the stars understand how valuable he is. And I want to talk about the tandem with Ben Simmons, but this does feel like a season where we're pushing towards one of those big contract extensions for Nicholas Claxton, like Jared Allen. And it's just, I found this, I know it's like a non-basketball, I found it fascinating. Like I literally loved every second of it. It was like watching a little mini like featurette on one of your favorite actors.
Yeah, it's really interesting what's happening with him this season because he's clearly becoming like more of, I would say, like a national story, right? He's
Yep.
not fully there. He's not on that like that next level, probably with the guys that are everyday household basketball names, right? Like your buddies that don't follow the Nets that are just kind of sort of tangential basketball fans are probably just starting to hear about him. But the fact that it's even happening at all is fascinating based on like sort of where the trajectory is for him, right? So like I do find it really interesting in that. And like we've already talked about him way more this season than I thought probably we would at all, right? Just because,
Yeah.
and it's all predicated on just like how good he's been and what's happening with him. It's really on both sides of the ball, like because the defense has taken a next step up. The offense is getting there. I'll talk a little bit about a great piece that Lucas Kaplan from Nets Daily, friends of the show, Lucas Kaplan, wrote, like doing a film study on Claxton. But just on a high level, it is really, really interesting for a guy who was like, remember, we're not too far removed from are the Nets going to resign him? Like, what is his value with this team? Like, this was not we're less than a calendar year away from sort of high level questions about where he even fit with the team. Like, do they have to make a decision between him and Bruce Brown? Like, is it one or the other? What does a contract for Claxton look like? Have we seen enough from him over the years, over his first 3 years in Brooklyn to really, understand like what his value is? Because remember too, as cool as the story is now, like this is a guy who really barely played in his first 3 seasons. He didn't really play that much. Like he was injured a lot. He had some weird stuff. Like he had some sickness stuff. He had some injuries. Like the minutes and just everything really weren't there for him. So just on a high level, I find it fascinating that this is where we are with him. And I totally agree with you that while right now he's on the $8.5 million and he's got a guaranteed 8.7 next year, like next year, I'd be shot. Like we're going to be partway through the year talking about like what the Nets need to do to extend Nic Claxton, right? Like beyond like, and for money significantly higher than because he's an unbelievable bargain right now. Like one of the best bargains in the NBA, honestly. $8.5 million for what he's doing on both ends of the court is a crazy steal. And so just a couple of with that, we know what you were saying for the LinkedIn piece or the piece
Nets
on
piece,
him. Yeah, sorry. It's just a cool story. It's just a cool story all around. Like, because there's just no way we would have said like January 5th, we were going to do multiple episodes a month about Nic Claxton.
And by the way, and I mean, people know this already, but 2019 is his first, 2019-20 is the first year in the league. 15 games, 32, 47 going up in years here. And then obviously, by the way, he's played and started every single game this season for the Brooklyn Nets through 35 games. And everything inside of this, I want to talk about the Kaplan piece coming up here in a second. But just, whether or not, listen, the free throw percentage hasn't quite gotten up there like we hoped this season. There's some areas they still needs to work on. But when you look at it, as he's played more games, also the field goal percentage, most importantly, 73.3. It's gone up every single year since he came into the league. It's gone up every single year in terms of free throw attempts. So he's at least getting the contact, going to the line, seeing if he can be more successful there. And then the rebounds per game have gone up. The assists per game have gone up. The blocks per game this season have taken a seismic leap from 1.1 to 2.5 blocks per game. And he's almost averaging a steal per game as well. So all of these things are indicative of a player. Again, go watch this little piece because you watch that and you go, yeah, it all tracks for me. It all makes sense that this is now a guy that seems to be cresting. And what I want to get into here in a minute is the Kaplan piece first and how it fleshes out more of it. What can be the expectations for Ben Simmons and Claxton playing together? But then in the big picture, like I wonder how high of the ceiling we can put on Nicholas Claxton this year and maybe even a little bit beyond.
All right, before we get to that, we will talk to you about our friends, our aforementioned friends over at LinkedIn. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 depends on all the team members you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you hire qualified candidates more efficiently, and you match open roles with people who have the skills, the values, the experiences to help you achieve those goals. You can find those all at LinkedIn and on LinkedIn Jobs. They help you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with these targeting tools. They go beyond the resumes data by just using insight from your job post, and they have 800, listen to this number, 875 million member profiles. Okay, try to do that one around in your head for a minute. Identify the most qualified candidates at LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them fast and for free. Makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications, all in one platform. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Okay, so let's dive in on the Lucas Kaplan article, friend of the show, a fan of the show, I think, if we're being fully honest here, just to continue to flesh out this conversation before I bounce a couple of questions off of you based on where Nicholas Claxton came from. And I really think that potentially there's been a pause in certain areas of his game in a positive way that we have yet to actually see fully develop.
Oh yeah, just before we get into Lucas's piece, I want to say one thing just about his minutes, just as a way to frame sort of like how much Lucas. No, get to him in a second. How much Nic Claxton has played this season? Just this season alone represents 36% of the total minutes he's played in the NBA. Right, so like by
35 games.
Through 35 games. Exactly. So I think it's like sometimes easy to forget how little he's played this season. We're trending toward sometime along this season's timeline, short of an injury. Half of the total minutes that he's played in the NBA will just come in this season alone. Right. And I think it's sometimes you can lose sight of that because he's been on the team a while. So while he's been on the team a while, the minutes, like I said before, haven't always translated for a variety of different reasons. So I just wanted to kind of frame that. And when we think about this guy, like this guy in some ways you could say is like in his second year, right? Like in terms of overall minutes. I know he's a fourth year player, but the minutes would have you like sometime along a second year player, something like that. 2.5 years into a career. So I think sometimes we just lose sight of that. Lucas' piece went up on Nets Daily. He's excellent. One of the really kind of just in some ways, I mean, great. He's really, really good at, and this daily's got a couple of great guys like this. Lucas is one. Matt Brooks is obviously other. Really good at breaking down film and getting into like sort of what makes an NBA player tick. And he actually started off with the offensive piece of Claxton's game and how that's gotten better this season. And it's really obvious, just both from a statistical standpoint and an eye test standpoint, which I think most people listening to the show would just be able to see for themselves. And the key actually he breaks down and something that we've harped on at multiple times this season, he's just gotten significantly stronger. Like, and this is important for Nets fans and Nets folks to understand when they want consistently and this is kind of dying off a little bit, and it's really a credit to how good Claxton has been, consistently wanting to bring in like another body in to shore up center minutes. I don't disagree with it sort of on a high level, but I will say that Claxton's strength is at his increased strength in the offseason. We knew he had put on muscle. It was very clear, just he looked different coming into the season. And it's actually having tangible benefits on his game where his finishing around the rim now is improved because he can't be knocked off a spot as easy. In the past, it was kind of he'd get into a hook shot or something like that, and he just could be moved off of his space easier. This season, it's harder to do that because he's just stronger. And it's almost like he wants to flex the strength too, because he's actually flexing after he dunks a significant amount.
Not Watanabe flexing,
but also, flexing. but like that it is representative of just how much stronger he's gotten around the rim, which is allowing him to finish easier, because just because you're tall doesn't mean you can finish around the rim easy. Like it's definitely not 1-to-1. You can be pushed off your spot. You can have your shot altered, even if you can extend your shot over a defender. If a defender can kind of move you off your spot or jostle you a little bit, like that will affect your shot. So the strength is at the core of why he's been able to make significant improvements on the offensive end and to make him just more of a two-way player at this point.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned that in terms of, because even when you watch him now offensively, he's doing some more athletic things when he's adjusting where his body's going, right? He's adjusting where the shot is coming from. But I think to your point, and what Kaplan is speaking to, is the idea of the intention. Where am I trying to get to have my shot? It may be an off-balance look, but you can go back last year, the off-balance look in a lot. By the way, we're going to talk about Simmons a little bit. Looked a little bit more like Simmons, a guy that's trying to find space and get something towards the rim. Now, when you see Claxton, some of the deliveries still look a little bit unorthodox, but it looks like he's intending to get to that shot and intending to get that little push, that little hook, that little runner. And those things come around being able to say, no, I'm not going to get that body bump that sends me an extra foot wider than I want to be, because let's be realistic, his finishing isn't perfect. But if you can have the consistency of where you want to be, then the shots fall better. And that's why he's having over 70%. Obviously, a lot of that work being done around the rim.
And along with that too, like, yes, he finishes a lot of dunks, right? He's got one, I think he's got the highest true shooting percentage in the league. I'll look that real quick. But in addition to just the dunks, like we've noticed too, I agree with you on like the floater that he's kind of had to employ at times looks softer. And I think that's actually helped him because I said this on a few podcasts ago, but it was that he's gotten like these sort of baby rolls to go in, right? Like these 50-50 kind of bounces have gone in for him. Sometimes that's luck. Sometimes that's just like you're getting more confident with a soft shot, right? And you are going to have those back rim ones just kind of bounce in from a little more often, right? Like, and I think we've seen that from him. We've also seen him alter with intention his finishing around the rim, so it doesn't have to be a dunk. If he's met at the point of the shot, he's been able to kind of get up and under on some shots where he can finish well with a little bit of a softer touch, like around the rim with a layup instead of a dunk. Like these are key pieces in being able to finish confidently around the rim. So while yes, he's number one in field goal percentage this year, and by like a lot, he's shooting 73%. The next closest guy is Rudy Gobert at 67%, and then it falls all the way down to 65%. So he'd have to actually miss a bunch of shots now to fall in a row, probably to fall out of this top spot. Effective field goal percentage won by also a lot, by 73% to 67%, and then true shooting number one, 70% to 69%. So like these aren't all just dunks. There's plenty of tall guys in the league. There's plenty of like, quasi 7-footers in the league that don't shoot like this, right? Yeah. It's because you have to do other things. It's not, you don't just get to be tall and go make every single shot near the rim. It's just, there's lots of tall guys that just can't do this in the same way. And I think that understanding that is key, although but there's definitely flaws. Like there's definitely things that we'll get to here shortly that are, it's not fully complete and actually could be really, really problematic too.
Well, so it's interesting because the one thing I also wanted to flesh out here, just in talking about going all the way back to the high school days. So I did just pull this up because he ended up playing also, it was the Legacy Academy, which was like a relatively new establishment down in South Carolina, kept him like close to home, which again was like a theme about this. He seems to have he has a brother, Chase, his younger sister, Carmen, is playing basketball. Like they seem like a tight knit family. So that seemed to be a part of it. And I mention that only because when you go back and look at it from starting in 14-15, he only played 9.5 minutes, 13 minutes, and then 17.5 minutes when he graduated from high school. When he goes to Georgia, he plays 14.7 minutes per game in his first season. His second season, he plays 31. And it keeps coming back to me. And we talk about the development, and we're going to get to the problematic areas because it's not like Claxton is now a perfect player. But then you go and look at the minutes and the development at the NBA level, and it keeps having this build up, plateau, make the adjustments to your body, the physicality, etc., and then reset it and then build up and integrate the next phase of your game. Like there does seem to be that element here. And when you think about that 2-year, 17.25 million, you mentioned about, will it be next year? Maybe it ends up happening sooner as far as the extension and getting on the front foot of it. But maybe the Nets got lucky in the sense, but part of that video as well was Sean Marks saying, seeing all of the little things that you think developmentally we can just go ahead and add and build to, and then you see where that growth trajectory is going to go. It looks like it's all adding up to that. I want to ask you the question about a phase of his game and whether or not you think that can be developed as far as becoming another attribute. And obviously, how does he and Ben Simmons function on the court together when it's been talked about that Jacque Vaughn specifically wants to have these guys in the closing lineup? Is that an achievable goal? We'll talk about that next.
All right, we will get to that in a second. First, going to tell you about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You go to BetOnline.net right now, you're going to see they have the Brooklyn Nets third overall in championship odds. I think it was as high as second the other day. Get with it at BetOnline. We got to let's get it a little bit higher, but don't worry because they're essentially at BetOnline. they're virtual locks to make the playoffs. We kind of knew that was the case. I was looking at to see where they had Jacques Vaughn in terms of just like coach of the year, because I was kind of getting excited. I went down the list. I saw no Jacques Vaughn, but then I noticed it was BetOnline just going through next coach fired. So this list made a little bit more sense when I looked at it from that point. Nice to see Vaughn not on that list over at BetOnline. They got you covered for all of your betting action. You get as granular as you want with even the stuff that's happened in the NBA and every sport as well. Obviously, we're rolling into the NFL playoffs here. Baseball right around the corner. If you love podcasts, they have those as well. Head on over to the website to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts.
And so where I wanted to start to close this out, we're going to talk about potentially some of the issues inside of Claxton's game and where he needs to evolve playing with Ben Simmons. However, the one thing that I'm curious about is, do you think, so this little piece on him from Greenville to Brooklyn, go check it out. A lot of it indicates to me that there's a world where the highest ceiling for Nic Claxton is a player who can be both a high-level rim protector, blocking on the defensive end, a versatile defender, a guy that gets out and runs the floor, and also someone that can be a facilitator. Like, it exists inside of his skill set that was developed at a young age. And I understand the idea of, as you get older and bigger, and Kyrie Irving mentioned this, there was a time when he was playing, with the same size guys as me, and then he went ahead and grew another foot. So it changes who you're going to be as an NBA player. But I think it exists inside of him. And when I went back and just thought about like some of these games going back in December, when against Milwaukee and against Golden State, he had 5 assists in both of those games, had a couple in the game prior. Like, this little idea that if he can start to now develop what he does in the paint when he gets the ball and distributing back out, dropping back off to Kevin Durant, to Kyrie Irving, and to other perimeter shooters, do you think that exists in his game, that he could be a guy that's giving you 3-4 assists on a consistent basis in the NBA to go along with the rest of what he's doing? In a meaningful way, not in a, as a byproduct, in a meaningful, intentional way, looking and finding shooters, being a facilitator in those instances.
See, I actually, well, okay. Does he have a skill set? Yeah, probably, but I just actually don't think the way that the Nets are ever going to play in a way that's ever going to need him to do it, right? So the answer to this is 2 different things. I think that yes, I think he has pretty good court vision. The assists per minute are basically the same every point of his career, right? So like, I know the assist numbers are up this season, but per minute they're the same. It's like 0.05 assists per minute. So like, it's just, I just think the way the Nets play their offense, he's not like, if we think about like Bruce Brown on the short roll last year, reading and reacting, like they just don't run that as much with him. They kind of like wait for him to slip to the dunker spot and get him the ball there. And that's just like not a spot he's going to be passing out of. If it was more rim rolling stuff, then I would say maybe, but it's not, right? And so they're just not wanting to do that because either they're having Simmons try to sort of be that guy and he's going to exist in that area. And this Claxton, just like think about the difference. I'm using Bruce Brown because like we saw Bruce Brown as a short roller last year and making these read and react moments. Like even Jared Allen, we saw this a lot from him. And frankly, a little bit Claxton too. We saw him catch high pick and roll, move to the basket, gather in the lane, and either decide then to finish, like to continue on momentum to the rim, or look at for like weaker strong side open 3-point shooters because you had the defense collapse. The Nets don't run that now. Like the Nets aren't running this kind of offense. And so I think that like, yeah, he probably does have it in his game, but they're just not going to change because they're just not using him in like the pick and roll like that as much. So I think that's probably where I land.
Yeah, so this is why it's curious, because the other part of it is, and we talked about it before, as soon as Jacques Vaughn took over, he got right back to this idea of Claxton and Simmons playing together, figuring it out. And I think the first reason for that is you talk about this. Name the best players on the team, and those are the first guys you want to be on the court all the time. And that's a part of, hey, what's the most successful that we can be, especially when it comes to playoffs. It involves Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and then you can debate, right, Ben Simmons and now Nic Claxton inside of this team. The reason why I asked it is because, so it's 2 things. One, if the intention is to play Claxton and Simmons together, especially in closing lineups, can they achieve that, or is it going to breed problems? And if it's going to breed problems, that's why I ask about, can Claxton be a bit of a facilitator? Because then the one-to-one of separating them is asking Claxton to do 30% of what Ben Simmons does offensively for you, trying to set up other players so that you have the same consistency and balance. Because the one thing that I've loved about this season is they've had such a consistency and redundancy from their starting lineup through the rotations. And I don't want to put this on Nic Claxton to become a 6-assist night guy. He's not going to be, but just that ability to say, if we surround certain units with more shooters, can we rely on Claxton to go and find them so that you're having that onslaught of those looks? Or can they achieve a Ben Simmons and Nicholas Claxton lineup together where it functions and works?
Okay, so we'll close this out with this, I think. Okay, I agree with you. Okay, let me. I have four different thoughts here. I'm gonna try to.
6 different questions.
It's okay. It's okay. It's 4 different things. So I'll start on a high level. Can Simmons and Claxton play together on the court? Yes. Like the 333 minutes this season with them together, the team has 120 offensive rating, 112 defensive rating. That's slaughtering other teams. So like obviously the pairing, at least in the regular season here, is working just fine, right? So that's answer 1. Like, can they play together? Yes. 2, does Nic Claxton need to be a facilitator in the offense with Simmons on the court? I actually still don't think that's going to be the case. I kind of said that before. I don't think you need him to be that. I think it's like a nice to have, don't need it, right? It's just like not the way their offense is driven. And even if they're going to get, because like they've been, even with Kyrie, if it's like Kyrie, KD, and Claxton, you probably want KD and Kyrie running pick and roll like with each other, right? More than you want the other one, because you want to really put defenses into a super bind with which one of those guys is going to come out the other side with the ball. So I don't think I'm worried to that. Where I do think Claxton and Simmons are problematic. So it was actually just 3 things. This is the third one. Where I think it's actually problematic for the playoffs specifically is not actually what they do on the court per minute. It's actually what they don't do well. And they just are so bad at free throws that like this is actually something that has not reared its ugly head yet, but it's going to for sure. We saw it a little bit. We saw a little hack of Simmons early in the season. I think it was in the Blazers game, right? Like they went after it. They're like, hey, we're going to treat this like a playoff game. We're going to hack him a little bit, make him go to the line. I think the real thing that's going to be the problem is something we're not going to actually even see until the playoffs because teams aren't going to bother with it in the regular season. Actually, they're so bad together free throw shooting. I think this is where the problem becomes. And not to like steer off course from like the other stuff we talk about on the court, but this stuff really matters. Like Simmons is getting to the line. These numbers are bad. So bad. 1.6 attempts per game, which for a guy like him that's supposed to sort of live around the rim is nothing. That's problem number 1. And even when he gets there, he misses all of them. He's shooting 41%. Then you have Claxton, who's made a slight change in his free throw shooting to go to more of the pause at the top of his release. That's yielded some minor upgrades. Like he's around 50% recently since making that change. He's 46% for the season. I actually think when it comes down to it, this will be the biggest problem. This will be the thing that actually has Nets fans ripping their hair out and has other teams just going after. They are going to foul the crap out of these 2 guys in the playoffs and just say, go ahead and miss them all. And one of you's got to come off the court. Because if we have 2 guys we can do this to, like, I think that this is going to be it's their Achilles heel for sure. Their Achilles heel is not the offense, it's not the spacing, it's not the defense, it's not any of that stuff. I think all that stuff is fine. The Achilles heel here is that when it comes down to it and teams play ultimate strategy, these games are going to take 3 hours and these guys are going to spend a day at the free throw line missing all their shots.
And it's funny too, because these are things that we're obviously well aware of. I've mentioned this before, going even back to last season and even back to when he was first coming to league, Nicholas Claxton. Like he made 64% of his free throws his final season at Georgia on 6 attempts, not insignificant sample size. Like he was making them. And this is again where I think, and the curiosity becomes, can he accomplish it in season? They've changed the mechanics here. If he can get back to something even close to that, and this is where, again, you come in the league, you're a bigger guy, so you focus on the defense, the versatility. Then you try to bring it back, get a little bit better with your shot, your touch around the rim, you bring it back. Now it's about the free throws. And if you're going to dream on one of the 2, I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to be Ben Simmons. because Ben Simmons has never shown that he's going to be a free throw shooter or that he has an interest in taking free throw shots.
I mean, if you're going to hold on a second, though, because if you're going to do retroactive stats, we're one season away from Simmons being 61% from the line. I know it's gone completely off a cliff, but if you're just going to use past stats, I mean, Simmons has a way longer track record of making free throws. I'm making them 60% still bad. But like, least, right? But I mean, but these guys are like 40% free throw shooters. So like 60 would seem like we just landed in Oz, you know, like with the, but so if you're just going to use Claxton's final season at Georgia, I'll use 4 seasons of Simmons, with 1 million minutes shooting 60%. So I'm just only going to push back on that.
You're fair. Because you're talking about, just to be clear, going back to 2018-19, he had 3 consecutive seasons, 60, 62, and 61% at the line, shooting over 5 free throws essentially per game in that stretch there. So you're right. And he came in the league shooting 56%. So in that sense, let's close out on this question. If both of these guys can get near 60% at the free throw line by the time this season ends, and let's say 55%, because
that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Sorry to be super negative.
So, because as it stands right now, then I would tell you, if I got to take one off in this moment, it might be Ben Simmons based on where they are currently. Claxton seems willing to go to the line and take those shots. Simmons seems adverse to it. A lot's going to change over the next 40 games before they get to the playoffs. And that's what I think is the most fascinating about this working together, because you said it right now, it can work. It can function. We don't even know, or maybe we do know what other teams are going to do if you put them on the court together in playoff games. And the question becomes, do you keep going down the road of developing them together, or do you accept that it's not going to be viable in the playoffs and figure out what the other option is? That's what becomes really fascinating for Claxton and for Ben Simmons. Ultimately, man, you just hope that these guys are trending in the right direction. Claxton clearly is.
Yeah. I just don't, it's so hard to know. Like these guys have it in their past that they've been able to do it better. Free throws can be a lot mental. It's unfortunate that that's what it is. I'm not saying that's what the case is for either one. I'm just saying that is a piece of the game that's a little different than some of the other stuff. Like there's a mental aspect. It's you standing there. It's you going through a repeatable motion. It's you feeling comfortable with that motion. Anyone that's ever shot a basketball standing there by yourself knows that you can start thinking about your mechanics. It happens, guys, even at the highest level, especially when they're not volume guys. So it's like the first time they've had to get into that motion the whole game, right? Like these guys don't take jump shots. So like this might be the first time you get into a motion since you were warming up. Like that's a long time and all eyes are on you. I'm only throwing it out there. I'm not saying these guys are mental or anything. I'm just saying that is an aspect of the game that is a little different than all this other read and react stuff. And like you have to have it. And it only gets harder. Like we saw, and by the way, we have close with this. We have 2 very high profile examples of it just not working for them on this stage already. Claxton missed every free throw in the Celtics series last year. They fouled him. He missed them all. They wouldn't have won the series if he had made them. So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying he didn't make them, and that's the case. And we're 1 season away from Simmons having one of the most like crazy blow-ups in terms of this stuff when it comes to just like not being able to hit a single free throw in the postseason. The year before the blow up in Philly, he shot 34% in the playoff, 34% on 6 attempts. Like,
it's a lot of attempts and a really low percentage. And
it's not like we're looking at this season's numbers and be like, well, they solved that. It's gotten worse. It's gotten worse for both guys. So I think I hate to end it on a bummer, but just
don't worry, we won't.
Oh, you're going to say something good? Just say something good. This is my major concern, and we're not going to have to worry about it for 40 more games or something like that.
Nicholas Claxton will hit key free throws down the stretch in playoff games for the Brooklyn Nets this year.
Okay. You're speaking my language now. Okay. We're going to get out of here. We might be live over the weekend on YouTube following the Pelicans game. We'll see how it goes. In the meantime, just because the weekends get a little hairy, but in the meantime, make sure you are subscribed to YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe there and put notifications on, because then you'll know when we're going live. Because of YouTube, if you're listening on the podcast feed, we talked about this a little. We talked this multiple times. The schedule for YouTube is different, and there's just frankly more stuff on YouTube. So there's live stuff, there's extra, there's bonus timelines, there's everything it's happening on YouTube. So if you're listening on the podcast, do both. Subscribe to the podcast, but also go over to Locked On Nets and subscribe on YouTube as well.
All right, friends, it's about getting these guys to come together and fit like perfect little puzzle pieces. So let's mingle and make it well. Come together now. Yeah, let's gel. That's Ed Roland, lead singer of Collective Soul.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. I was trying to think of the name. What's the name of that? What's the name of that famous? I can't remember now. Shoot. 1994, Doug's gonna be very annoyed that he doesn't have that he doesn't have this song at the tip of his tongue. Okay, we're gonna get out of here. Yeah, there you go. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.